Welcome to Grace in the Shadows. This is Dr. Marla Behler and
Dr. J.
Dr. Jonathan Behler. Well, hello, everybody. Hope you are doing well today. We'd like to give a quick shout out to Deer Park, Texas. Yes, Texas. We're very thankful to have you listening. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And please make sure that you share with others.
Yes.
You can check us out at graceintheshadowsor.org. You can call us at 251-244-4645, or you can email us at drjonathan at graceintheshadowsor.org. Well, a little bit in the news today.
What's going on?
Yeah, I saw that there was a ceasefire possibly declared between Hamas and Israel. A lot of different stories out there about this, but we went to Christian Daily International and found this. Negotiators from Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement on a 42-day ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza. President Joe Biden and other officials announced Wednesday the deal raises hopes for an end to over a year of war that has killed some 1,200 Israelis and thousands of Palestinians, devastating the region. They say that the ceasefire is going to begin Sunday, and logistical, I can't talk today, details are still being finalized. So, interesting. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's this is going to be. They've had those before in the past with different conflicts.
Yeah.
And someone decides to get out a gun and shoot somewhere, and the ceasefire suddenly ceases.
Yeah.
Or starts again.
Right, starts again.
Yeah. And so, it's optimistic for sure.
It is.
And, my understanding is both Joe Biden and President Biden and President Trump worked together on this. Wow, clap hands. Yay! They worked good together.
All right.
Something, yeah. Anyhow, but we need to be careful, I think, for a couple reasons.
Yeah.
I think when President Trump comes, I think there's going to be a zeal to really protect and give Israel a feeling of safety and peace.
Right.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But I also think it's opening up more opportunity for the Gog and Magog conflict of Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Right.
Which says that they will be without walls. When that happens, they'll think there's peace and safety when there is no peace and safety.
Right.
And so before that happens, there has to be some sort of peace and order in the Middle East. It'll be a false type of peace, but it'll be peace. So I think this is another example of that.
Absolutely. So, keep your eyes peeled. Make sure that you're reading news and listening to news from people that are non-biased, which is kind of hard to do today. But
and Jesus also said, in Scripture, how specifically Paul says, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3, that peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly as labor pains.
Right.
And when they say peace and safety,
yes,
Jesus then says in Matthew 24, 36 through 44, but about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son of Man, but only the Father.
Yeah.
Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day of your Lord will come. So I think what we see here is, Jesus said also peace and safety.
Right.
Beware.
Yeah.
We can't predict the day, but
no.
During the time of Jesus, he said it was the hour.
Right.
And if it was the hour 2,000 years ago, we have to be in the minutes.
Or the seconds.
Or the seconds.
Yeah, all right. I think so. So keep your eyes peeled. Keep your eyes peeled. Things are happening.
So we're looking at transition to Acts chapter 23.
Acts 23. All right.
I mean, there are lots of things happening in the world.
There really are.
That really is just people that are into prophecy are just like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
We never thought there would be times that we would see this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Acts chapter 23, we're looking at Paul again.
Okay. All right.
And the life of Paul.
Verses Paul.
1 through 2.
Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." At this, the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Wow.
So Paul looked earnestly. Now, the previous day, Paul saw opportunity, kind of unfulfilled.
Right.
He was speaking to the crowd at the Temple Mount, and they did not let him finish, and they really started a riot and wanted to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Now Paul has another opportunity. He's had like two opportunities and both times ended in riots. And so now he's at the council, the Sanhedrin. Mm-hmm. Sanhedrin was a type of kind of a religious / political system had the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
So it's kind of like a Supreme Court or of sorts, maybe?
Kind of like Democrats and Republicans.
Okay.
It really is. The Pharisees were conservative and the Sadducees were liberal. Mm-hmm. But Paul starts here, he says, men and brother. Now, it's interesting because usually when Peter addressed the council, when he was before the council, he would say rulers of the people and elders of Israel. Mm-hmm. And that was the normal way that it was addressed.
Right.
Because they were. But Paul is speaking to them, to the council, in a way that's equal footing or equality with them. Mm-hmm. So when we look at this, he says, men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. Now, what does this mean? I think it means that Paul his conscience was cleared about any violations that they accused him of regarding the law. Mm-hmm. His conscience was cleared because he knew Christ fulfilled any sin that he's done. And so when he says this, Ananias did not like it.
No, he even told him to hit him on the mouth.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah. And so what's the reason you think he did that?
He did not like to hear what he was saying. He probably felt like Paul was blaspheming the scriptures.
I think he thought he was blaspheming the scriptures. And how dare he say that he has a good conscience,
right,
when he's broke the law, accused of breaking the law, in front of the Sanhedrin or the council,
right,
that day.
Which in their laws were not important to God and not important to Paul, really.
Yeah.
He was more concerned about God's word, and he was more concerned about living for God. And
Paul and Jesus' life are so, there's a lot of similarities between Paul and Jesus.
Right, a lot of parallels.
Yeah. Not similarities as far as deity,
right,
but as far as their lives.
Situations, yeah.
And Ananias was the high priest here, and he was not a good guy.
No, he was not.
You know what he's known for?
What?
Stealing. He's known for assassinations.
Wow.
He was known for violence. He was known for people getting behind Roman soldiers and stabbing them with daggers.
Wow. Really?
He was not a good guy.
And he was a high priest.
Yeah.
Wow.
And get this. You ready?
Yeah.
It was illegal for a Jew to strike the cheek of an Israelite, because if he strikes the cheek, he's striking the glory of God.
But he told him to strike Paul.
Yeah, I know.
Interesting.
He's what you would call a hypocrite. 3 through 5.
All right. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck. Those who were standing near Paul said, how dare you insult God's high priest? Paul replied, brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it is written, do not speak evil about the ruler of your people.
Who else said this? God will strike you, you whitewash. He called him a whitewashed wall. Jesus.
Yeah, he did.
What's a whitewashed wall? Is it like painting the walls or something?
It's like the tombs, right?
Yeah. It was kind of like they looked good on the outside, and they were nice and beautiful, but on the inside, they're
decaying.
Death.
Yeah,
they were death.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Paul met that. And it was kind of an outburst. It would have been nice to have known Paul's nonverbals and tone of voice here.
True.
Because there is some controversy.
Right.
What do you think the controversy is? Do you think there's any controversy?
Well, I'm not sure.
Well, the fact of the matter is, when he said this, you're going to see that the next scripture, he's going to say that you mentioned that he says that you shall not speak evil of your ruler people.
Right.
And he didn't know he was the high priest.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Studies of the star tell us that in order for a star of that magnitude to be seen from that far away, that it requires the alignment of certain planets. I'm just thinking to myself, God loves us so much that to send us a sign, he caused the planets to come into alignment.
So I was wondering that. So Paul didn't realize he was the high priest, and he said that about him. And he's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that because.
Right.
Interesting. So he kind of backpedaled.
Well, Paul was probably a member of the Sanhedrin before he got saved.
True.
And that's why he said men and brothers.
Right.
And not only that, it could be, there's a couple possibilities.
Okay.
We weren't there.
Right. We weren't there.
But one possibility is Paul, it was 20 years after he got saved and all his mission trips that he came and he's standing in front of these men. Some of them he went to school with.
And some of them he didn't know at all.
And some of them, you know, I've been in stores.
Right.
And I've seen little old men. And I realized I went to high school with them. So is it possible that they just look different? You know, I think so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It is also possible that it says in Galatians that Paul had bad eyes.
He did. So he probably didn't see very clearly. So he probably didn't couldn't decipher what his outer garb was.
Right.
He didn't realize because of his bad eyesight that he was dressed as a high priest.
Because he says, look what big letters I write with.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how bad his eyes were.
Right.
And it also could have been sarcasm.
Could have been.
You mean you're the high priest? Yeah, You're surely acting like one.
Kind of calling him out, huh?
But Paul did something honorable here that we as Christians should do.
Right.
When we realize we sinned or did something wrong, we admit it.
We admit it. We do.
Repent.
And that's important to do. You know, we shouldn't bow up and act like we're completely in the right when we're in the wrong. We should admit it. It's important to.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Verse 6.
Okay. Verse
6 through 9. Go ahead there, Dr. M.
Okay, Dr. J. Then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and the others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, my brothers, I am a Pharisee, descended from Pharisees. I stand on trial because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead. When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees believe all these things. There was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. We find nothing wrong with this man, they said. What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?
Yeah, this is pretty good. This is pretty clever of old Paul.
Yeah.
You know,
kind of making them turn on each other.
Yeah. You know, you ever see that there was times in college, I was kind of a rascal, that we would kind of, you know, sometimes throw something out there at a party or something just to get two people that believe different things to argue.
No, really?
And that was not good. I shouldn't have done that. Nice. And I wasn't a believer.
No.
But Paul was kind of doing that here strategically.
Right.
Because they were teamed up. The Sadducees were conservative.
Right.
They believed the Bible. They believed the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, the Torah. They believed it. They believed in miracles. They believed in the resurrection. They believed in angels.
Right.
Whereas the Sadducees
were Sadducee because.
Yeah, the Sadducees believed that there was no angels, no afterlife. And, you know, they did not believe in angels. They did not believe in the resurrection. They did not believe in... They basically were Sadducees.
Absolutely.
So the Pharisees and the Sadducees were very different.
Yeah.
But when it comes to teaming up against what's true and what's right, enemies have when they have a common enemy, will become good buddies for a short time.
That is very true. Very true.
Paul did something strategic.
He turned him on.
I am a Pharisee.
Yeah.
And he was telling the truth.
Right.
He was still a Pharisee, even after he got saved.
Yeah.
The son of a Pharisee. And concerning the hope of the resurrection of the dead, I'm sure he's looking at the Sadducees and the Pharisees as he's doing this.
Yeah.
I am being judged.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's looking around. I'm sure that the Sadducees are starting to unfold their arms and they're looking at, hey, and the Pharisees are doing the same thing, and they're about ready to have an argument.
Right.
Yeah. He says, I am the son of a Pharisee. And so the council's divided. What happens?
Let's see.
Yeah, a dissension arose.
Yeah.
And Paul picked the right issue. Immediately, the Pharisees, he gained them as an ally.
Right.
And they begin to argue with the Sadducees.
Yep.
And as a result, it became so overwhelming that the guard would have to be called in just a little bit, next scripture.
Okay.
And the scribes of the Pharisees party protested, saying, "We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God." Do you remember someone else who said that? Gamaliel.
Mm-hmm.
Actually Paul's mentor,
right?
As a Jew, as a Pharisee,
mm-hmm.
And he said the same thing. If God's in this, don't fight God. If God's not in this, God in with Jesus and this Christianity, it won't last.
Right.
And he was wise with that, I think.
I think so too.
Go ahead and read 10 through 11.
The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force, bring him into the barracks. The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage, as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome."
The last uproar started because Paul mentioned Gentiles.
Right.
It was a trigger. Because the Jews did not like Gentiles.
No, they did not.
And the commander feared the same thing would happen again with the resurrection,
right?
This fight,
that
he might be pulled to pieces. Can you imagine how bad it was?
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so Paul's ploy worked.
Right.
That he was rescued from the council, ironically from a Roman guard.
Right.
Yeah. And go ahead. Now, how do you think Paul felt? Was it 2 or 3 times he tried to share the gospel with his fellow Jews? And the last time he tried to share with the Sanhedrin, with the most powerful Jews in the nation, in Israel.
Right.
And he feels like he probably failed.
He probably did. He probably was like, well, I should have said this, or I should have said that. I wish I had had more time to speak. So, but, God appears and tells him, take courage. You've done what you needed to
do. Go ahead and read that.
All right. What verses do you want me to read?
Verse 11 through 15.
All right. The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage, as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." The next morning, some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we've killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here."
So the following night occurs, and he's probably feeling dejected.
Right.
He's probably feeling a little maybe depressed. Maybe he even felt like giving up.
Yeah.
Because Jesus comes.
Yeah.
The Lord stood by him.
Comforted him.
Comforted him.
Yeah.
I think that was probably pretty encouraging to him.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm sure it was.
Be of good cheer.
Yeah.
Jesus says that. He's the only one that said this in the Bible. Be of good courage.
Right.
Be of good cheer. He told it to the bedridden paralytic in Matthew 9:2. He told it to Jesus told to the woman with the 12-year bleeding problem of the same thing, Matthew 9:22. Jesus told his frightened disciples in the Sea of Galilee, "Be of good cheer, do not be afraid," Matthew 14:27. And John 16:33, he said the same thing to the disciples the night before his crucifixion, that in the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. And so here again in Acts 23, he says this, and I think Paul was very encouraged.
I think so too.
Yeah, so we look at this. What else does he say here in verse 11 that's quite interesting?
Verse 11, let me back up a little bit.
He says, you did an awful job, Paul, and you should just go back and woe is me and eat some worms and go back and just...
No.
You're a loser? No, what did he say?
You testified about me in Jerusalem, and he told him you're also going to testify in Rome. So he's letting him know, hey, you did what I called you to do, and you're going to do it again.
Yeah. I mean, Paul probably felt like a failure.
Right.
And I've been there.
Oh, yeah, we all have.
But Jesus says, hey, Paul, be of good courage. You didn't fail.
You did great.
It may appear that you failed, but you didn't fail.
Right.
For you testify in Jerusalem, so you also bear witness at Rome. He mentioned this as well, that he would witness to Rome earlier in Acts.
Right.
That he would be a witness there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see God's providence, the providence of God.
Yes.
We don't see any miracles per se here.
No.
We don't see any real doctrinal. I guess you could argue the resurrection a little bit.
All right.
But what you do see is the providence of God. You know what providence is? Providence is God working through natural law and the most mundane things of life, bringing forth his purpose at the right time, right place for his glory.
Yes.
And so Paul was going to Rome, and it didn't look like he was going to Rome. It looked like he was going to die.
Right. Because, I mean, they're all saying, hey, we're not going to eat until he's dead. So I'm sure, and he had to hear that. There wasn't anything wrong with his hearing, just his eyesight.
Yeah.
And so he probably thinks he's done for.
It says in Acts 19:21 that when these things were accomplished, Paul purposed in his spirit that he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must see Rome.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a prophecy from God.
Right.
That, the gates of hell couldn't stop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, another book where the providence of God is, you know what it is? I'm going to tell you. Esther.
Ah, yes, definitely.
God himself is not mentioned once.
Never. But
he's all over it.
Are all over it. Yeah.
Yeah. 12 through 15.
Okay. 12 through 15. I just read that?
Oh, you did?
Yes,
I am so sorry. Well,
read.
and then as we see this in 12 through 15.
I can read it again if you want me to.
No, you're good.
Okay.
They had some assassins. This guy, Ananias, hired some assassins. This guy's a good follower of the law to kill Paul.
Right.
And there was 40 of them. And they had taken an oath. They weren't going to eat or drink until he was dead. And so, it's interesting here. They suggested to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow as though you were going to make further inquiries. That's to ask questions concerning him.
Right.
But in reality, they just wanted to kill Paul.
Right.
But, wouldn't this guy who's cared so much about the law find lying as a sin or murder as a sin?
Obviously not.
You just see the hypocrisy.
Right.
Go ahead and read 16 through 22.
Okay. But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him. So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you. The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, what is it you want to tell me? He said, some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request. The commander dismissed the young man with this warning, don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me.
So Paul's sister, we don't know much about his family. I have no reason to believe she was a believer. I don't even believe his nephew here is a believer.
Right.
I believe he was probably training to be a Pharisee himself. But he happened to be there at the right time, in accordance to God's providence.
Yes.
And so a lot of times people will claim miracles are not really miracles, they're providence, which is very miraculous. It's just working through natural law.
Right. Okay.
And so basically he warns Paul, warns the guard, and they come up with a strategy on dealing with it. 23 through 30.
Okay. Then he called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix. He wrote a letter as follows, Claudius Lysias to his excellency, Governor Felix. Greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him. But I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. Keep going.
Yeah, that's fine. So what do you think about all this here?
I don't know. I mean, they are definitely kind of warring with each other. You got this group over here saying this, and this group over here saying this. So it's kind of confusing.
Well, it's interesting that through God's providence, they got 470 trained Roman soldiers that would escort Paul out of Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Those assassins wouldn't have a chance.
No, and they were getting him to Rome, right?
Yeah.
So he could do what God told him to do.
And he would be in Caesarea for a couple of years. He would be in Rome for a couple more years before his death.
Yeah.
But he would testify to Felix. He would testify to other kings, which we'll see later. And this would fulfill prophecy that God told Jesus said to him when he first got saved, that he would testify before kings.
But those poor guys said they weren't going to eat until he died, and it was several years later.
Yes. What you're saying? What happened to them?
They fell over.
Yeah, that's a great point. What happened to this poor guy? Did they just starve to death? Or, it's interesting, the hypocrisy of the Jewish tradition.
Right.
There was different types of vows. Ancient rabbis allowed 4 types of vows to be broken: vows of incitement, vows of exaggeration, vows made in error, and vows that cannot be fulfilled by reason of constraint. And so I think that was probably.
So they allowed them to say, you vowed this, but it's okay. You can break that vow.
Yeah, they
interesting.
Had a lot of extra
okay,
vows.
So they didn't fall over from hunger.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So this is pretty cool in that even though Paul did not see much fruit that had appeared,
right?
God's providence was working behind it.
Yeah.
To accomplish what he's would ultimately accomplish.
Right.
And even when he gets to Rome, you're going to see that none of the kings that we know of or governors came to know Christ that we know of.
Right. I mean, there might have been some that after years down the line, maybe they thought about some of the things he said. Maybe they did come to know him.
That's possible.
Right.
But we do know in some of his letters, he said, greet those in Caesar's household. So, it's interesting.
People,
There's guards that were chained up. Can you imagine being chained to Paul?
Servants that would bring them food.
He would be telling them as they're chained the gospel all day long.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So they had to be influenced.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
What do you think of all this?
I think it's pretty cool. And I think, a lot of times we try to gauge our, witness and everything on how we're feeling. And, I got tongue tied and I didn't do very well. But, as long as we're speaking the truth of God's word, it's not going to be returned void. No matter what we do, no matter how much we think we mess up, God is still going to be glorified and his word is still going to come forth clear.
Just be faithful and obedient.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people did Noah, when Noah preached 120 years?
None.
Well, his family. 8
well,
people.
Yeah, his
8
family.
People.
Right.
That's it. Out of 120 years
But
of
they
preaching.
might have already known the Lord, so who knows? But yeah, no one outside of his family agreed with what he was saying and got on the boat.
We are not called to get people saved. We're called to be faithful.
Yeah.
And we leave it at that and we're obedient.
Absolutely.
And this is an example of how God can take a mess, turn to a message for his glory, for your good.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Really appreciate it. Take care. Goodbye.